Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Board Games Unlocked, and today I'm doing a discussion over the solo variant of the Castles of Burgundy special edition called the Chateauma. At least that's how I think it's pronounced. I haven't taken French since high school, which was a while ago at this point. But, yeah, I have never played the solo variant like before getting this copy. I did have Castles of Burgundy before. I don't even know if it had a solo variant. I think it did. But I kept seeing whenever people were getting their copy of this, and they were also, talking up the solo variant, so I figured I would give it a shot myself. And let's see, hold on, give me just 1 second. I'm seeing how this is pronounced. I mean, it has to be, yeah, because it's like chateau. So yeah, I'm thinking it's Chateauma. So it's fantastic. It's superb in just design and elegance, just like Castles of Burgundy, the multiplayer game is. And the reason why is because it's so streamlined, yet still poses a challenge. Like, some of my favorite solo variants are ones that don't take too much demand of the player to actually play the game, but also not like tacked on or feels like it's really forcing a solo variant where it's like, yeah, you just kind of whipped up a solo variant just to say it's 1-4 so people would buy your game who are solo players. That's not the case here. It definitely, I wouldn't necessarily say it feels like another player, but at the same time, Castles of Burgundy is kind of a, I mean, it's such a non-conflict game anyway that it still does feel like there's another player, because it's taking tiles just like another player would, and it just goes about it in like a different way. It scores kind of big chunks of points, whereas another human player is going to be scoring like a little bit of points here and there, and then maybe a big chunk of points every so often. The Chateau, the Chateauma player, is kind of like always big leaps to catch up to you, but yet it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like you're like, wow, okay, I have to do all this work, but the Chateauma player doesn't, because it's basically a computer. And because some of those solo variants where you have so much upkeep to do your job, and then it's just like, I'm gonna take this for free, I'm gonna take this for free. It's like, that takes me 17 steps to take that. Like, you just get to take it. Yeah. And this doesn't feel like that at all. So how the Chateauma works is it's based off of basically these big cards. They have kind of small groupings of like 4 to 5 different, well, actually 3 to 5 different tiles. And whenever you're playing just like you would. Everything, like, nothing changes for you. You roll your 2 dice and then play out Castles of Burgundy the way you would, and taking tiles that you want based off the duchy board you got. And then the white die determines if it's a 1 to a 4, it does the leftmost card. If it's a 5 or a 6, it does the rightmost card. And that's going to be the Chateauma's priority card, meaning that if this was the card that was in the 1 to 4 and I rolled a 1, it would be looking for a ship, a building, a livestock, and another building to try and complete. But it only takes 1 tile at a time. So whenever your turn's done, it goes to the Chateauma's turn. You roll their die. Oh, it's a 1, and that's kind of the area that it prioritizes. It's like, oh, on this card, it wants a building. So if there's a building in the number 1 spot, it's just going to take it. And it gets bonuses just like you get bonuses for buildings. Like if it took a banksmith, well, I mean, on the Chateauma player aid, oh, bank, 2 silver coins. Okay, cool. You give it 2 silver coins, and then at the end of its turn, if it has 2 coins, it will always buy from the Black Depot area and place that in its reserve. And I mentioned the reserve because that's kind of the biggest difference of the Chateauma. I mean, you have a reserve as well of 3, and you're capped at 3, where the Chateauma player isn't. Like, it will prioritize kind of like top left to bottom right of what it wants to fill out. So it's like, oh, it wants to buy from the black depot area, and it wants a castle if it's there. Okay, well, the castle's not in there, so then it wants a mine, then it wants a monastery, then it wants livestock, and it kind of goes in that order. And if nothing's available, and it doesn't have a wild, because they can get wilds, it will take a black tile and flip it over and make it a wild, so that it can't get hung up like that. Like, the Chateauma will very rarely miss a turn. And that's, like, really the only saving grace you have is if it takes a wild. But then the next time that happens, then it's going to place that wild to fill out a card. And the cards range in terms of points and difficulty that you want to play at. So, like, each card has I can't remember the names of the difficulty modifiers, but it's basically an easy, medium, and hard. And like this card alone, this is a 5-tile card, so easy gives it 17 points, medium gives it 21, and hard gives it 25. And it kind of ranges in that, so you have some leeway. The Chateauma will also get tile bonus or tile completion things. Whenever it completes a card, it takes the tiles and it puts them up into like a collection area. So let's see. There we go. So it looks like this. And if it ever completes an actual row, then or the section of a color, it will fill out and take, if it took all livestock, then it'll take the livestock and get the appropriate number of points based off player count. And you might be thinking, it's a solo game. Why is there a player count? And this is one of my favorite things about this variant. It doesn't have to be solo. You can actually have the Chateauma join you in a multiplayer game. If you really, for some reason, don't like Castles of Burgundy at 2, I would say get a different game because it's amazing at 2. But if you really want to keep it because you love it at 3 or 4, okay, well, if you can't get 4 people around, but you can get 3, throw in the Chateauma player, and you have a faux 4th person, which, I mean, really isn't going to feel all that different, except you don't have the 4th person who didn't bother to come to your game day. So, in some ways, the Chateauma is even better, because they will always be there to play with you. That's kind of depressing, actually, now that I think about it. It's like, you're always here for me, Chateauma. I love you. And then you become one of those people that develop a romantic relationship with an object. And I mean, the special edition is quite sexy, so I kind of wouldn't blame you. The solo variant is great because, again, whenever it's taken stuff, like, you can actually kind of game it a little bit. It's not just always going to be sniping stuff from you. It's not always going to be, like, filling out cards left and right. You can look at it and be like, okay, let me roll, my dice and the white die. Okay, I rolled a 5. So the 5 is going to go on this card. It hasn't taken any, so I know it's going to prioritize a mine. I can see there's a mine out there. I rolled a 5 and a 6 as well. And, look, I'm going before them. I would also like a mine, and there's a mine in the spot 5. So you can actually take it from it, but be aware that if there's no mines, it's going to then look in its reserve. If there's no mines there, then it'll move on and go to castles. Oh, I didn't grab the castle. But you can still see what it's going to want before you can actually do your turn. And you can't really do that with another player all that much. I mean, you can look at their board and you can be like, what are they going to try and go for? This kind of game for me doesn't warrant that, but that's probably why I don't play at a competitive level. I just want to do what I want to do, see what's available, and take it, and hope that that works out in a strategy that's going to be better than my opponent's. But you can still see what it's going to want. And like, for example, this last game of it that I just played, it couldn't ever get a castle because that's what I was also going for. But once I ran out of castles, then, I mean, theoretically I could have taken one and just keep preventing it from getting it. But that would always just fill up a spot in my reserve. But it's like, okay, well, now I've held off long enough. If it's doing that card, there's a castle available. It's just gonna take it. And I kind of like that. I like the fact that there are 2 cards that it can jump back and forth. Now, granted, my rolling in this particular game was always low, so it kept focusing on 1 card. So you can have that. You can't really mitigate anything that it's going to do. It's like, oh, well, I rolled a 1. Oh, rolled a 4. Rolled a 1 again. Rolled a 1 again. So now it's just going to hyper-fixated on that card, which means it's going to jump a lot. But, again, you can look at it and be like, it wants livestock. There's 1 livestock. I will take it. And it doesn't have any in its reserve, so there's none in the Black Depot area, so it can't finish out that card this turn. So I might be able to squeeze out some points or get a big chunk of points before it can actually finish that out. And the endgame scoring also doesn't really feel cheap. Like, the way it scores is kind of similar to you. The only major difference is like the monasteries, it just gets flat 4, like, which I would much rather enjoy. It's like it doesn't bother with like actually seeing what type of buildings it has or livestock or anything like that. It's just every yellow tile has, that's going to be 4 points. Gets a point for each unused good, similar to you. Gets a point for every silver, similar to you. Then it kind of goes a little bit off, but like then it gets a point for every tile in its reserve and 2 points for every tile in its incomplete cards. Whereas the Automa never gets workers or anything like that. And I still found it, I played it on the medium difficulty, or that's the only time I've played it, or not the only time, sorry. That's the only difficulty I've played it on. And I've always felt like it was a reasonable challenge, which I, again, like I've never been like, wow, this thing is kind of stupid. Like, what, like, why aren't you, like, actually filling out rows and getting points? What, is the Chateauma stupid? But it's always been able to keep up with me, and the great thing is even though it scores for all that stuff at the end of the game, you can most likely score more at the end or keep up with it if you play well. And I like that. I like that it doesn't feel like it's cheating or that it's cheap or you're putting in all this effort and it's just getting points nonstop, and or if it's a beat your own score. I think that's fantastic. So, is it my favorite like way to play Castles? No. I still like another person being there, but did I really feel like it was also that big of a difference between playing it 2, 3, or 4 players versus playing it solo? Also, not really. I could see people getting this edition specifically for its solo variant, just because it's like, well, it's easy to set up, easy to tear down, easy to play, because the actual game, this rulebook that is 28 pages, 3 of it really is the solo variant, and 2 of it is actually the actual rules, which are pretty much condensed into your help sheet. So, like, once you play against the Chateauma once, you're going to be like, oh, I don't need the rules anymore. This all makes sense to me. And the second page, or the third page, is actually difficulty modifiers for the solo variant. So that's kind of actually just, you can ignore that until you're ready to up the difficulty. And then the rest of the rulebook is expansion stuff. And then the way you actually play the game is also like 3 or 4 pages. And what's also cool is because the special edition came with like 10 or so expansions, you can play with those as well. Like on the back, it's like other expansions. For monasteries, 27, 28, and 29, just ignores it. For the crane, it tells you exactly what the crane does. For geese, white castles, inns, I guess inns it's not supported, but border posts, trade routes, shields, all that's in here. And the vineyard expansion, which seems to be the biggest expansion for Castles of Burgundy. You can play with the Chateauma as well for all of that, and I think that's magnificent design, because sometimes it's like, well, how do I do the solo variant if I want to add in these expansions? Oh, no, you can't play with solo with those expansions. or an expansion is purely designed for solo, and it's like, this is bad. But I like that. I like the fact that it's just so modular with however you want to play the game. You want to play it at 3 with cranes and geese and vineyards, but you only have 2 people. Okay, play with all those expansions and add in the Chateauma, and you got 3 players, and you get to play the expansions, and you get to play Castles of Burgundy without being... I mean, someone obviously has to run it, but it's, again, it's so simple. It's roll the white die, which everyone's going to roll anyway. First player's going to roll it, put out the good, and then place the white die. I mean, you probably would just have the first player control the Chateauma, and then it's like, oh, okay, now it's its turn, which also is based off turn order. So you get to be like, oh, okay, well, it's going after us. Now it's its turn. All right, it rolled a 5. Boom. And 5 is here. It wants a mine. There's a mine. Take the mine. Place it there. Its turn is over. And then, all right, end of the round, or finishes out the card. Mine goes up. And now at the end of the era or decade, whatever they're called, it gets a coin. The only kind of thing is, I guess the only confusing thing about it is kind of, I don't know, like, it checks the board. There's nothing there that it wants for that particular tile. It goes to its reserve. It's not in the reserve. Then it's like, okay, on to the next one, and it does top left to bottom right. It's brilliant. I think it's fantastic. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give the solo variant a 10. Like, it's... Yeah, the Castles of Burgundy is such a fantastically perfect game in my mind, and the solo variant is no different. I can't think of, like, a negative that I have for it. It would be lower, very minor. It'd probably be like a 9, which is still like, I mean, whatever. These numbers don't mean shit anyway, but... like, it would be a 9 if you had to play, if it was only solo, but it gets that extra point for being able to be played with other player counts. I think more solo variants need to do that. And, I mean, there's a lot more that I can think of that do kind of have, oh, hey, you want an extra person? Then throw it in there. Like, Root does that, where it's like, well, Root at 2 is kind of bad. Oh, well, it's not horrible at 3. Let's put in these Automa factions. More games need to do that. Be great solo, but also be a viable player option if you don't have the number you want to play it as. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Chateauma solo variant for Castles of Burgundy. Let me know what you think of the variant in the comments below. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you. Hey everyone, thank you for watching, and I really hope that you enjoyed the video. If you would like to see more of my content, go ahead and click that subscribe button and the bell to be notified whenever I upload any new content. If you feel like supporting the channel, you can go ahead and click that Patreon link to be taken to my Patreon, and any help is truly appreciated. Other than that, stick around for any other run-throughs or reviews or cool top 10s or whatever I feel like putting on. Other than that, like, comment, share, and subscribe, and have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you.